Awesome. Hi, I'm Derrick. I work for Jamf. Welcome to Penn State. It's been nice, almost 4 years since I've been here, so happy to be back. This is my third time speaking here. I've been managing and securing and configuring Apple devices out in the enterprise for the last 15 years. Wore a lot of hats. Used to get people screaming at me because their internet wouldn't work. Wound up moving into an IT specialist role. Wound up working for a small healthcare system here in Pennsylvania. Most recently was at Lehigh University. And I've been with Jamf now for the last 4 years. So wore pretty much every IT hat that there is. I hope everybody's having a really good afternoon so far, and thanks for attending this session. So we're here to talk about BYOD and the scary reality that is BYOD, because more and more employees are just carrying around these phones and putting work stuff on them. And how can we come up with a way to make sure that these devices are secured, that they have a secure passcode on them, that any kind of company resources they may be accessing, that they're accessing them securely, and that our information security team is going to be happy. Does anybody have a BYOD program in their environment? A couple, okay, cool. Most organizations that I work with on a daily basis do not. They don't want to dabble with BYOD, but today in 2023, they're looking for ways to cut back on expenses. And one of those ways is to implement a good BYOD program, because then they don't have to pay for a new iPhone for their employee every 3 years. Employee doesn't have to carry around 2 devices. They could just use their own personal device with an eSIM. So that's what we're going to talk about, the different workflows that are out there now, and what that could do for you. So Webster's Dictionary defines BYOD as the practice of allowing the employees of an org to use their own computers, smartphones, or other devices for work purposes. My definition is BYOD is security plus privacy. It makes everybody happy. So, like I mentioned, we don't have to go ahead and deploy these corporate-owned devices. Let's let someone use their own personal device. A very successful BYOD program is really going to come down to increasing user adoption and making sure that we have a solution that's making sure that we're solving the things that InfoSec and our leadership wants us to have: security and privacy. So today we're going to be talking about Jamf and BYOD. What we are talking about really is kind of MDM agnostic. At the end of the day, you could use something like Apple Business Essentials or another MDM as well to implement a BYOD program, but we are going to be focusing and talking a little bit about Jamf. Cool. Some benefits that are available for a good BYOD program. Obviously, we're going to have formal management of what applications and what resources our employees are going to have access to using that device that they already have today. Data and security protections that are available. We're going to talk about what you can do with BYOD and what you cannot achieve via MDM with BYOD. And how we could keep that personal and corporate data separate. Quite often, every day when I'm engaging with customers and prospective customers, this reality of separating personal and corporate data, it just doesn't click. So we're going to be doing a live demonstration with my iPhone. I'm a big fan of live cooking. Things may go wrong. In that case, I have a backup video that I recorded. but I'd like to do it live. So all of our personal data is going to remain on our personal Apple ID. So if I have an Apple ID, like mine's jamf.adam@icloud.com, that's what's signed in on this iPhone here right now. When I tell people that if they go to settings, that they will have 2 Apple IDs there, they look at me like I'm crazy. But that's what we have now in 2023. We're able to have 2 separate Apple IDs on the devices, 2 separate storage buckets for our personal apps and our corporate apps. And all that corporate data is going to be secured using a managed Apple ID. Quick, just gauge of hands, is anybody leveraging managed Apple IDs today in the room? Okay. We got people planning on it. I saw one hand down there. Yeah. It's a process. We went through the process about a year ago at Jamf. I had a Apple ID using my Jamf email address. And they sent us out an email saying, hey, we're going to be moving to manage Apple IDs. Very nice, precise communication, which is super important for a BYOD program. Because essentially what happens, once federation takes place inside of Apple Business Manager or Apple School Manager, you could federate 2 ways. You could use Google Identity, or you could use Microsoft Azure AD, or as they just rebranded, Microsoft Entra. I know, right? Let's throw some more confusing words out there. The hardest part really is just getting that federation to take place. And what's going to happen then is your identity provider, either Google or Azure in this case, they're going to talk to Apple School Manager or Apple Business Manager. Anytime you create a new account within that identity provider, it's going to create a managed Apple ID for that user. Even if they're not going to use it, it's available to them. So if they have a corporate device, they could just go ahead and sign in with the credentials that they're using for everything else today, and they're going to have a nice shiny Apple ID with 5 gigs of iCloud storage to keep all their work stuff separate. Pretty nice. I just switched to BYOD about a month ago. I had a corporate phone, decided I wanted to go to BYOD. It was a really nice process. The big thing when it comes to managed Apple IDs, if somebody already has an Apple ID that they went to iCloud.com or they signed up on their phone with that Apple ID, when federation takes place, that user will get a notification from Apple saying, hey, you have so many days to go ahead and convert this account over to a personal Apple ID. So you could change the email address. All your data is going to go with it. And then this new corporate Apple ID is going to get created. For most people, works out pretty good. Again, communication is going to be key for this process. Otherwise, you're going to have people that are confused, they don't know what they're doing. After a certain amount of time, that Apple ID is just going to be converted, and that user's data is just going to go bye-bye. This is where a lot of people kind of just like, nope, we're not moving forward to manage Apple IDs. But if you have a good plan in place, if you communicate it to your end users, people are really going to like it. They're going to like to have that storage that's available to them. They're going to like to be able to back up that work stuff, so when they get a new phone, it just moves the work stuff over. And you'll see here once we go into the demo, I'm going to go ahead and remove my corporate Apple ID, and we'll see all the corporate stuff disappear. But that's for a little bit. So here it is. This is what it looks like. So what you could see on the screen, we got sign into your work or school account. That's where your users are going to tap settings. They're going to go to VPN and device management, and they're going to go ahead and sign in with that nice Apple ID that they just got. In the middle, you can see we have settings. I got my healthcare user account up at the top, and then below it, I got an Acme Soft corporate managed Apple ID. Yes, we have 2 Apple IDs on the settings screen. Hard to believe, but we got it. And then on the right, on home screen, we got our corporate applications, in this case, self-service, the Epic application, and Jamf Trust, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So we got the device, it enrolls, we get that managed Apple ID on there. What else are we able to get? Big thing is trust. And this is all done on the user level. So your users are enrolling the device. They're not bringing it to you. They're not bringing it to some random person in their department who happens to know a little bit about IT. And maybe that person might be doing something they shouldn't be doing on that device. They're self-enrolling via the settings application. We're also able to customize things with the Jamf self-service application. So maybe I want to deploy some managed applications down onto the device, but I don't want to deploy all 20 applications that we want to make available. I can make those optional applications available in the self-service portal. That way they could go ahead and install them at their leisure. And then privacy is going to be easily maintained here. So we'll have that personal separation of data and that corporate separation of data. They're not going to talk to one another. And we're able to balance that with some restrictions that MDM provides. And we'll talk about that here in just a minute. I do get the question a lot, why should I use BYOD when I could just use MAM or mobile application management? Anybody here using MAM? Anybody ever hear of it? Got a big hand back there.
I love it.
You love it. Can you tell me why you love it?
Because we can manage a little-known feature called conditional launch, which reminds our users, hey, update your operating system or we'll block you. And it works on devices that are unmanaged and devices that are managed in a different MDM, not Intune.
Wonderful.
And if you'd like to come hear my talk on Friday, I'll tell you how to do it.
I will be there because you came to my talk, so I'll come to your talk. I appreciate that. So,
But I'm interested to hear about this.
for those of you who are viewing this online after the fact, thank you for attending the session. But I just wanted to repeat for anybody who is attending virtually that was not able to hear the response, but she has a MAM solution in her environment. Got a couple different MDMs going on, correct?
We have one MDM,
One MDM? Okay.
but not Intune.
Not Intune. And she's pushing out some device compliance policies. No?
We are using mobile application management, specifically app protection policies that employ conditional launch.
Okay. So app protection policies that employ condition launch. Thank you for shedding some light on that. And I look forward to your session. But typically, what I hear from people when it comes to mobile applications management, they don't have that fine balance of being able to deploy things like connecting to the corporate network, being able to deploy certificates, email, as well as automatically installing applications on those devices. What was that?
And don't forget taking those away.
Yes. Yes.
While destroying their data.
Yes. And that's the big thing. And that's something that I struggled with when I was a customer. Well, not a Jamf customer, but another MDM provider, was we have these people who are leaving, they're just disappearing, and how can we make sure that their pictures of their dogs and their contacts and everything remain in place, but we're ripping out their email, we're ripping everything else away. And Today, we have a way to do that. App support is also limited. Not every single app vendor out there supports it, which we're all kind of familiar with the hurdles with that. And then, of course, iOS updates. So, we're not at the point where Apple releases a new version of iOS once a year. We're getting security response updates now. We're getting lots of iOS updates. So that can break some things with MAM. So just talking a little bit about those managed Apple IDs that are going to help to build this BYOD program. These are created using that federated authentication via Google or Azure. Those are the two identity providers that Apple supports as of today. You could also integrate it, if you're an educational organization, with your student information system, or by having a big CSV file and uploading that. When somebody removes the profile off the device, or if somebody decides, you know what, I don't want my work email on here anymore, they at any point can go ahead and sign out, and it's going to remove everything that was deployed. So it's going to remove their Wi-Fi connection, it's going to remove their email, any managed applications that were deployed, as well as anything that lives in that iCloud account, like any kind of notes. So the biggest thing that comes up is, I want to implement a BYOD program, but I want to respect my end users' privacy. So let's talk about some of the things that MDM can't do. Can't see any personal information. That's huge. A lot more. We don't inventory personal applications. So I have my phone enrolled into my company's BYOD in Jamf Pro. They can only see the applications that I tapped on self-service or that they automatically deployed. We can't send any erase device command. We can't remove any of their personal data. Most importantly, we can't see anybody's photos. Can't update DOS. But we could use things like conditional access integrations to make sure that somebody kind of has to update their OS in order to access those company resources. We can't require a complex passcode. We can't even say, hey, you need to change your passcode every 30 days. But what we can say is you could have a passcode that needs to be at least 6 or more characters. Can't view the screen, access their location, do things like disabling hotspots, Bluetooth, can't clear their passcode, can't update apps, can't manage activation lock, can't lock the device or reboot it. Just a sample of some of the things that MDM cannot do. And this is important because when you have conversations with leadership, when you guys return back from the conference, maybe you want to talk to them about a BYOD program. So it's good to know things that MDM cannot do. And there's really just a couple things that MDM is allowed to configure and enforce on these devices. Things like configuring accounts, requiring that 6-character passcode, enforcing certain restrictions, saying, you know what, Outlook is managed, but I don't want you to copy any data from Outlook or Salesforce over to your personal Gmail account. And that's something called managed open-end. We can connect to the Wi-Fi, we could configure applications, we could configure VPN connections, and that's about it. This is what Apple is allowing us to control on a personal device. And there's a nice document, which I'll share with y'all, that you could provide to anybody who needs it, that lists everything that you can and cannot do with MDM on a personal device. So how does this all work on the back end before we even get the device enrolled? So the device is going to identify itself to the MDM, in this case Jamf. The user is going to go ahead and enroll that device using their identity provider's credentials. A session token is going to be created, which is going to allow that authentication to pass through. And then finally, it's going to enroll in MDM, and any payloads, such as Wi-Fi configuration, passcode requirement, applications, are going to be deployed down onto that device. So, account-driven user enrollment is one of the ways that you could get your devices enrolled. And it's the easiest way. It's what I would recommend doing. In the past, you had to go to some URL, some random URL that somebody emailed you, or you would have to type in that URL on your device. You'd have to sign in. Somebody would get a screen saying, hey, Jamf has permission to do X, Y, Z. And then they get scared that they're going to lose their data, and they get scared that Big Brother's watching them. So now what we have is the ability to maintain control and security, as well as even some data access. We'll talk about a little application called Jamf Trust a little bit later to help us make sure that we're only accessing applications when we're allowed to. Regardless of how the device is enrolled, the big thing is it's becoming a managed personal device. But essentially the way it works, and we're going to hop into the demo here in just a moment, but somebody taps settings, they go to general, VPN and device management, and then they go ahead and sign into that work or school account. It's establishing that trust. It's a native Apple experience. It's done through iOS. And most importantly, it could be removed anytime. As far as the data goes, we got that personal iCloud drive, and then we got the corporate. Our corporate data is going to be completely separate from our personal files. And we have separate encryption keys that are created for our corporate data. And then we could restrict that data. Just the other day, I forgot I had a BYOD device. I was on Salesforce. I was working on somebody's account. I needed to copy a piece of information and send it over to them. Well, I was able to copy it. Wasn't able to paste it anywhere because the app that I was trying to paste it into was not a corporate managed application. So you do a lot of neat things with managed OpenN, which is a payload that's available via MDM. So let's hop into the demo. Let's see what the experience looks like. So bear with me just a moment. I'm going to kill Keynote, and we're going to connect to the phone and go through the process. And it's not sharing. Interesting. There we go. Cool. So, we got an iPhone here. Personal iPhone, not managed by MDM. I got all my personal applications on here. Sign into my personal iCloud account. I want to access my work email. So what I'm going to go ahead and do, I'm going to tap settings. And I'm going to go ahead and scroll down to general. And in here, you'll see VPN and device management. Now, if you've been using MDM for a while, this has been kind of rebranded. This is where they used to go ahead and hide on a supervised, institutionally owned device your profiles for visibility. They just kind of rebranded it VPN and device management. Makes sense. And you'll see here we have the ability to go ahead and sign in with a work or school account. So in this specific example here, I'm using Azure Active Directory. However, this is also supported by Google Identity. So I'm just going to sign in here. So my company name is AcmeSoft. It's going to take me to my page to sign in. Now it's super important, like if you have multi-factor authentication or anything like that set up, this is an HTTPS session talking back, in this case, to Microsoft, so multi-factor and all that fun stuff is supported. Yep. So I'm typing in my password here, and now you'll see I got this nice native Apple experience here. So it's letting me know I got an iCloud account for work with dedicated storage. So Apple gives everybody 5 gigs of data. Could also collaborate together with other colleagues via Keynote or Pages. And then we got our work notes as well, which are going to be separate. So again, Apple's just being transparent and letting us know that we're going to go ahead and get this device enrolled as a personal device. And Azure wants me to just sign in one more time. But again, this is using my credentials that I use for everything else in my organization. This screen probably looks familiar for anybody who's managing an iOS device or even a computer. It's the remote management screen. This here, Apple's just calling out, letting everybody know, hey, this device is going to be managed as a personal device by your organization. Any data that's in your managed applications is going to remain on that work partition. And at any point, you could go ahead and remove, or your organization can remove this device from management, and you'll lose all that data. Most people don't read this. They hit allow. They go, I want my email. Take a couple seconds here, and before you know it, we'll have a nice new shiny Apple ID on our device. I'm on conference Wi-Fi, so acting pretty good though today. So it's asking me at this point if I want to restore my work apps and data, because I had another phone that I had this set up on, which is really nice. So if you're going to, in this fall, you're going to get the iPhone 15, you have this set up on your device today, it'll go ahead and back up all that work stuff for you to that iCloud storage. And in this case here, it wants me to restore it. For this example, I'm not going to restore it because I want to show you what the whole process looks like.
If you wanted to restore them, you'd have to restore the personal data plus the work data separately.
Yeah, it would be 2 separate restores essentially. So when you sign in, it's going to ask you to go ahead and restore. So you'll see here now, it's wanting to install some applications. So we're probably going to get like 3 prompts here to install the Jamf self-service portal, the Jamf Trust application, and anything else that, in this case, I set up to be deployed down to my company devices. But you'll also see up here at the top now, it's showing healthcare user at acmesoft.co. It's being transparent and letting me know what restrictions are being deployed down onto this device. I can see here I got 2 managed apps. I got some restrictions. I got a SCEP certificate. And I can also see what apps it's giving me right away. I could also see the other devices that are signed in, just like a personal Apple ID or iCloud account. And then also what data settings I want to enable. So if I really want to take care of that 5 gigs of data that I'm getting, because I can't purchase any more, I could say I want to turn iCloud Drive on or off. I want to turn Notes on or off. Maybe I don't want it to back up anything. Save that space. You have all the same capabilities as you do with a personal device. And it's all that native Apple experience. It looks exactly the same as if I was going to do it on my personal Apple ID. So going back in here to settings, up at the top now, hey, I got my Derrick iCloud Apple ID, and then below it, I got my Acme Soft one. And you'll see Apple puts a nice little badge there to let you know that that's the corporate one. Huh. My admin has a policy in place to make sure that this device is encrypted, so I need to go ahead and create a passcode. It's got my passcode set. Now I'm compliant. But maybe I want access to my company email. My company also happens to have a preferred web browser that they use. And that's where self-service is such a great tool. So in this case here, I got some featured applications up at the top, but I could also just browse the entire catalog to see what applications I could install as managed applications. So keep in mind, if I would sign out, or if my admin would take away my capabilities to enroll into BYOD, these apps will disappear. But I don't need to sign in with an Apple ID to gain access to these applications. So I'm going to say I want Chrome and Authenticator and Outlook. And you'll see here, Apple's being very transparent and popping up and letting you know. In this case here, acmesoft.jamfcloud.com is going to go ahead and install and also manage Outlook. So super important to take note of that. You'll see here my applications are now installing. I didn't get any kind of pop-up to go ahead and sign in with an Apple ID because it's grabbing the licensing from Jamf Pro. So here I got my personal notes, but if I go back here, you'll see I also have a folder now for my corporate notes. So I got a Mac, Hello PSU Mac note here. I'll go ahead and edit that, got that in there. And again, this is all separate, and it's not just notes. So if I go in here to files, same thing. Yeah. Browse. So you'll see here, I have my iCloud drive for Acme Soft available to me. How's that look so far? Yeah, we got a question in the back. You want me to throw you the catch box or? Great catch.
So we've got 365 subscriptions for our users, and they can go and get the Office iOS apps on their own, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Outlook. If we have access to Outlook already and then do the MDM managed Outlook, are we going to have two versions of Outlook? Are we going to have just the managed one? Is it going to fail? How is that?
Yeah. Yeah.
I was thinking more along the lines of personal Outlook. Like, you know, if they have their own 365 subscription and they use Outlook email on their phone.
Yes.
What's going to happen if we push Outlook?
Yeah, that's a great question. So if you do push Outlook, or if somebody goes into self-service and hits install for Outlook, it is going to take over management, just like as if you would have a corporate-owned device. It's going to take over management. You do have the ability to say, hey, I do not want Outlook to be backing up to iCloud or other restrictions as well. That's the whole point of that pop-up that comes up when you do obtain an application. It's letting the user know, hey, this is now going to become a managed application. So it is one of those things that, yeah, it would be great. One thing that I will say, a lot of application vendors are now doing EMM apps. So as an example, on my personal BYOD Jamf phone, I have Dropbox, and I use Dropbox personally for file storage. Jamf also leverages Dropbox for file transfer, but they're deploying the the Dropbox and the Slack EMM applications. So I actually have 2 versions of Dropbox and 2 versions of Slack because they're actually 2 separate applications. And maybe if we have time at the end, I might pull up my other phone and kind of show you guys what that looks like. But that's essentially the app vendor or the app developer is saying, hey, you know what? We want to have a version of this application that's just for corporate stuff, that can only be deployed via MDM. Maybe it has an app config with it. Maybe there's a certain configuration. I am gonna do the Dropbox example later, so you'll get to see that here in a few minutes.
Not probably maybe getting ahead of you on this, but what about like the profiles thing? Can you set a different profile that hey, hides all your non-work apps when you're in the work mode? I know they demoed it at JDoc.
Yeah, exactly. So you're talking about focuses. So yeah, if you guys are not using Focus today, absolutely set it up on your phone. It takes a little bit to set it up, but like I have as an example, my traditional working hours are 9 to 5 Eastern time. Come 5 o'clock, my no work focus comes on, changes my background. It gets rid of Slack and Outlook and all my work apps. They're still on the phone. So technically if I went in the library, I can go ahead and open them up, but they're not on my home screen. So I have a different home screen that's just for after work. Also, I have one just for work. So when I'm on my work profile or my work focus, whatever you want to call it, it's not showing me my social media apps, things that are going to distract me. I also have a sleep focus that pretty much gets rid of everything. But yeah, if anybody didn't get a chance to see Dean Hager, who's the CEO of Jamf, you could go out on YouTube and you could check out our JNUC keynote from 2022. He does a really good example of how he uses Focus and being a CEO. But yeah, I use it myself. It's a really nice tool that Apple made available. You should probably have a session on focuses next year. Let's talk about that. Yes, can we pass the box? Oh! There you go, Brian.
Hey, I just wanted to riff off the idea of getting like Outlook in a BYOD scenario. Do you know what happens as far as doing sync of Office accounts into the Apple Mail calendar type accounts using that Active Sync plugin that's been in iOS forever? Does that segregate that data in? Because I got users that would prefer to have all their mail in the Mail app,
In a Mail app, because
rather than having Mail app and Outlook app.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. So yes, you could still go ahead and deploy Mail accounts down onto the devices. Inside of the Mail application, they would have a separate, I don't know if you want to call it a profile or a separate little tab for their personal mail and then for that work mail. However, again, it's being managed as a BYOD device. So at any point, if they want to opt out or if they disappear or have a resume generating event, that mail account will disappear. Their personal mail will still be there.
So it sort of still looks like it is now because you have different mailboxes, different mail
Yes.
accounts that shows up in Mail. It would look pretty much the same.
Yes.
It's just that if I pull the management, then that account will go away.
That is correct,
Okay.
yes. Yep. Thank you. Cool, another question. I
Yes,
love the questions, by the way.
I use like notes to keep all my printer IP addresses, right? So when I'm out and walking around, so if I take that notes and I have a managed Apple ID, and I move it from the personal notes field into that managed notes field, if you would, for that Apple ID. That managed Apple ID now owns that.
Yes.
I wouldn't be able to move that back out, because then it would be within, if you have that restriction,
Yeah,
on
so
your managed Apple ID.
So if you were using managed open-in, then yes, once that information is in that particular notes, the corporate notes,
Yep.
if you're using managed open-in, you would not be able to move it back to that personal. And again, it just depends on how you have it set up. Some people don't have managed open-in set up. They're not taking advantage of that.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, of course.
Looking at managed Apple IDs, say if we already got users, already have they set up their Apple ID with our email account already instead, how would that merge over if we did do the managed Apple ID with their user accounts on their corporate owned device, already has the Apple ID of their work email address?
Yeah, so number one, if they already have an Apple ID set up with their corporate email address, they would get that email from Apple once you federate, saying, hey, you have 30 days to go ahead and convert this personal Apple ID over to another email address. That way it frees it up for now your new shiny corporate Apple ID. As far as the mail goes, what I've seen people do is they've kind of used it as leverage, saying, hey, you know what? We're going to remove that mail profile that you have on that device today. You need to go ahead and enroll the device as BYOD in order to continue having access to your mail. And that's also where you could utilize an application like Jamf Trust to go ahead and gate off access to that mail unless they have the Jamf Trust app on the device, which they're not able to get unless they enroll into BYOD. So.
Well, this would be for users that have two devices. They've
Yes.
got their personal device with their personal Apple ID and then a work device with their work Apple ID.
Yes.
So say if they just wanted to go to move their work Apple ID to their personal device and get rid of the corporate owned device.
Yes.
So that would still just merge without having to create it as a personal and keep their work stuff together.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. So they would still be able to have access to that information. It's not just going to go away, but at that point, they're essentially saying, okay, any data within this Apple ID is now property of
So either
your
goes
org.
to the personal, they could change the email address, or either just goes over to the facilitated Apple ID.
Yeah.
Is that- okay.
Yeah. Which I would not suggest doing for personal stuff. I would probably just go ahead and
Yeah.
set up a new email address or change the email address that they're using. So, yeah. Because if you're someone like me, I've been using my Jamf email address for years. And then when we got that email saying, hey, we're going to take over this, I was like, okay, I'm taking this and putting in my personal email because this is personal stuff. So, cool. Great questions so far. If anybody has anything else as we continue, please feel free to let me know. There we go. Cool. So we're in here. Got my notes. I decided I don't want to have my work email on here anymore. I don't want the work apps. They're bugging me too much. So, like I mentioned, at any point, you can come in here, you can go into that account, and we could sign out. So it's just letting me know, hey, just a heads up, you're signing out of that managed account. It's going to remove any apps, data, anything else associated with it. Just confirm with your passcode. It happens pretty quickly. So it's I'm sorry. So it's removing removing everything. I don't have that account there anymore. I don't have those corporate applications anymore. If I open up notes, I only got my personal notes now. So all the work stuff's gone. We didn't have to wipe or soft wipe the device. It just removed it natively. At any point, I could come back in here and just sign back in. Now, if somebody does get offboarded, there is a sync that happens when you federate either Google or Azure with your Apple Business Manager or Apple School Manager. So it is syncing up. So, somebody has a resume generating event, they're no longer with the organization, it's going to go ahead and delete the Apple ID. Cool. Give me just a moment. I'm going to head back over into Keynote. Cool. So, why should we implement BYOD? Number one, why should we have to carry around multiple devices, multiple phones, when we could just have one? Whether or not you're paying for a company line, eSIMs are great. If you have a newer iPhone, why not just send out an email to somebody saying, hey, here's your new company phone number. You could turn it off at any point. Going along with those focuses that we were talking about earlier, you just got to go into settings and cellular and hit the little tick and it'll turn that line off. So if you're going away on vacation, you don't want to be bugged with work calls, things like that, it's really nice to just shut that number off. Yeah, you might still have access to your work mail and things like that, but you might not be getting phone calls and text messages and things like that. So eSIMs are the future. Everybody's going to have to start dealing with them. I put an eSIM on this device and on this device here, and it was really easy. No longer having to eject SIM trays. Yeah, so it's really nice. I like to travel a lot, so it's nice when I go to Costa Rica, I could just turn off that work line and not have to worry about it for a month. What's that? Yeah, exactly. Yep, I got T-Mobile and AT&T. So the other big thing is really, you have that ability to customize the right settings for your users. Really at the end of the day, to make sure that anything that they're doing remotely while they're not in the office, or if they're in the office and they're on some sketchy Wi-Fi network, whatever it may be, that we have the right security measures in place to make sure that it's a good experience. Cool. I did want to show you guys something cool. So I'm going to kill this again. I'm going to switch phones. Nah, you guys don't want to see me. You can already see me. One second. Cool. All right. So this is my actual personal phone. So we were talking about Dropbox earlier. So you'll see I have this app here called Jamf Trust. Had anybody hear about an application called Wandera? Okay, a couple people. So we acquired Wandera about 2 years ago, and we have this Jamf Trust application. So Jamf Trust is another one of those managed applications that you could deploy not only to your corporate-owned devices, but also to your BYOD devices, which I did on that phone. But what you could do, where I was mentioning the different app vendors out there that have EMM apps, so like Slack, Dropbox is an example, what you could do is you could route that traffic through Jamf Trust. So instead of somebody having a traditional VPN, it's spinning up a little microtunnel connection for that specific app at that specific time. So they're not getting free reign to do whatever they want on a VPN. It's just a microtunnel that's being used just for that specific application. So I got Jamf Trust on here. So like right now, if I would open up Dropbox, I'm able to access all my stuff. But maybe I'm sick of Jamf Trust. I don't want it on here. I don't want Big Brother watching me or some other excuse that people come up with. If I open up Dropbox now, it's saying I have no internet connection because that connection was now severed because we have Dropbox, in this case, set up to go ahead and route that traffic through Jamf Trust and allow us access to Dropbox. Pretty cool. This is something, if anybody is using Jamf Connect, do we have any Jamf Connect users in the room? Yeah, bunch of hands. This is something that we now have 2 versions of Jamf Connect. So we have Jamf Connect, and then we have Jamf Connect Basic. Jamf Connect Basic is what Jamf Connect was, Mac authentication. Jamf Connect now, or as I call it, Jamf Connect Plus, whatever you want to call it, now gives you the ability to have this ZTNA connection. So anybody who's using Jamf Connect and doesn't know that, reach out to your customer success manager or reach out to your account executive, or when it comes time for renewal, let them know you want to do it. For anybody else, if you want to try it out, reach out to your customer success manager, reach out to your AE, come up to me at the end here. We will gladly let you try out Jamf Trust. It's a pretty cool tool, especially when you are building out this BYOD environment. It's one thing to be able to just deploy applications, but when you could really, at the end of the day, say, hey, you need to have that managed Apple ID, and you need to have this specific app that we're deploying, and if you don't have that, you're getting cut. That's all I got. I want to leave the rest up for any questions or open discussions. I hope this was helpful for everybody. I hope you all learned a little bit about BYOD. I'll be here all week, so if you want to talk more, let me know. Jamf has a booth over by the mess hall. If you haven't been by, stop by. We're giving away raffling or drawing, whatever the proper term is, AirPods Pro. So please enter if you haven't had a chance to enter. We got stickers and stuff, and you can talk with an engineer like myself or Mr. Stout over in the room there. Cool. I'll throw the catch box around if anybody has any questions. Yeah.
Back to using a Microsoft email account. I'm wondering how I could restrict, so if somebody chooses not to enroll a phone in BYOD, do you know of a way that I can restrict them from setting up that Microsoft account on their phone if they know how to do it?
Are you using conditional access policies in Intune today?
No. So I'd have to do that through.
Yeah, Jamf Pro does have an integration with Intune. So you are able to do what we are now calling device compliance, which replaces the legacy conditional access workflow. What happened is Microsoft is going to be deprecating the classic API come the beginning of next year. And they're replacing it with a new modern API, which will eventually open up the door to better things. So it is a free integration. You just got to go out on Google, or if you want to come up to me and give me your email, I'll send you some documentation on it, but it is a free integration. The big thing is you just need to go into Intune and set up a conditional access policy with however you want to gate that off. So works for macOS and iOS. Great question. Any other questions?
So what I've noticed with, because we're in the process of testing the BYOD
Mm-hmm.
process. Bring it on. So we're looking at it based on, like you said, some MDMs allow you to do such and such and can't do such and such. One thing I did find that one of the MDMs we're testing does allow you to do a selective wipe to where it will remove all of the apps and information off the device, but it keeps the profile installed, is what we have noticed.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and that's, one of them removes all the apps that you push, the other one just removes the apps that are linked to that MDM, but it keeps the apps that you have pushed to the device and the profile.
Yeah. There are some options within Jamf Pro. I have not tested it lately with BYOD, but there are some options. There's a checkbox to remove the application when the MDM profile is removed. I'll have to test that with BYOD.
I tried to test BYOD with Jamf, but we don't have managed Apple ID set up, so I
Okay.
can't get past that.
Well, if you get to the point of federating and getting them set up, feel free to let us know. Awesome. Got a question in the back. I'm afraid that I'm gonna like hit somebody's water.
This question is more so for the folks in the room here. Aside from all of the things that we learned today about the benefits of BYOD, I'm curious if anyone is willing to share. One, if you offer BYOD for your organization and why? Like, what is the incentive for your workforce to adopt BYOD versus you giving them an own device? Just curious if anyone is willing to share some light.
Ours, sorry, go ahead.
So I'm from the University of Nebraska, and currently we're doing a lot of new security posture, checking on our network, and implementing microsegmentation. And in our university environment, it's very diverse. There's lots of different funding models across the university, and one area that we found that we need in this microsegmentation environment, BYOD, is for like grad students, for example, where departments don't necessarily have funding for to just give a laptop to somebody. They have to go through this BYOD process, and it's a little bit different from different kind of take on this. We're using a tool called OnGuard for our Aruba network, but it's more for a posture assessment. So it's making sure that they're following certain like security guidelines to bring their device on the network and access network resources available to them through their personal device, and we can still maintain some level of security with those devices.
Our cybersecurity team's really pushing it a little bit, but we're going through testing other apps, like with similar to Jet Trust, just tunneling filters to allow access to where, with Samaritan's Purse, the countries we go in, we have to watch for security issues and things like that. So we're just mainly looking at it just based on a security risk, because we've got some users that have access to email already on personal devices, but then again, we've got security risk with that. So we're just trying to double down to make sure that we are secure and there's no leaks or anything like that.
A lot of people that I've been talking to lately, their budgets have been cut, and they're not getting any funding for new iOS devices. But they have the funding to be able to pay for a license for a BYOD device, as long as that person is willing to enroll the device as BYOD, which a good percentage of people will, if given the option of keeping two phones in their pocket or just having one with everything that they need access to, they're going to go with the BYOD model.
I'm interested in setting it up because I'm an IT person, I want the control, but not really, but sort of. Because I'm in a similar situation where,
Thank you.
I'm in a similar situation where I have most of my users, I give them a choice. Do you want a work phone? Do you want to use your own phone? And most people, I have one person who's like, oh, I'll take two phones. I want to keep my life separate. But most people don't seem to mind. Now, I also struggle with another situation. We used to have an in-house phone system, an in-house PBX that died a horrible and ugly death. That I knew was coming after, God knows, 15 years or whatever. So I've moved to a hosted VoIP system from our ISP. And I find that the people that I decided needed to have a company phone number don't use the company phone number. I just get spam calls on it most of the time. So I think most of my client-facing people who are using phones are probably just calling from their personal cell phone, which that gives me a little bit of anxiety because I don't manage that phone number. But then again, is it any different if I have 20 different AT&T phone numbers that I manage for cell phone versus, direct dial extensions from the VoIP thing? So keeping that thought process in mind, I'm like, well, if they're gonna have their own phone and I'm gonna put their Microsoft account on that phone, it might be more useful to me to have Outlook. Another app that we use is Basecamp. If I can keep that in a separate company, partition on the phone and keep that account separate, yes, then if they leave, then we just pull back that enrollment and that stuff goes away. So I might as well have that. And if I'm not actively showing people and new people how to set up their business email account on, to add it into the mail app and the contacts app and all that kind of stuff. And I'm just starting to nudge people towards doing it in, the company Outlook account and the app that comes down and the company partition for BYOD. And I'll sell it as, it's a separate thing. You can't see the division in here, but it's in there, so you don't have to worry about. And then I don't have to worry about. So I have a little bit more control of that situation, even though I don't really care about the control, but just as an idea, and that's something that I can sell the owner of our company on too.
Okay.
Great catch.
Thank you. So it's a complicated space because depending on how big or small your organization is, you're going to have various and sundry people, whether they're identity management, cybersecurity, regular IT, help desk, God forbid, that are managing conditional access, which all bets are off if somebody else other than you is managing conditional access, because I've seen a very heavy-handed way of employing conditional access where it's only the device that's been issued to you that is allowed to access those apps versus a more loosey-goosey way of being able to do it on a BYOD type of device. So that's one thing you have to consider. Another thing is, to your point, having, leveraging something like app config, I think it's called app config.
Yes.
App config is wonderful. Look it up. You can fill in your information and it will spit out a configuration, not a configuration profile, but essentially the stuff that you put into the Mac app, whether it's Outlook or whatever email client you're using. And that way it's configured. The user doesn't have to worry about what they're punching in, but because it's a managed app, the minute they leave or the minute you push the button, it disappears along with all its data. The stuff that I'll be talking about on Friday is more about enforcing or if, show of hands, who uses Nudge? So it's Nudge for iOS. It's basically nudging the user to push the button to update their software. Now, sure, we can force it on the user, but I'd much rather have the user be autonomous and be responsible and make that decision. And so it goes back to, you know, this choice. BYOD or company-owned device. And the problem I see with a company-owned device is that you have to have money to pay for those devices. But on the flip side, with BYOD, you now have to potentially interact with other groups to ensure that the device is being accessed in a proper way that is okay with your organization, okay with, let's say you're in, you know, a retail space, PCI compliance. Let's say you're in a government space, you gotta deal with SOX compliance. There's a whole bunch of stuff. So it's complicated.
Just to throw out, she mentioned app config. If you're not using app config, appconfig.org, great website. Not every app supports app config, but a lot of the big players out there do, like Outlook. I hate focused mode. I hate the focused inbox. You could turn it off with app config on all your devices. So, but yeah, you could also do a lot of really neat stuff with variables. So you could throw in $, department, $, email address, $, Jamf extension attribute, and it'll save you and your users from having to type in that information manually, as well as going in and just changing those preferences or settings. So,
And I'll just add one other thing. Please don't feel like this is the only place you have resources. If you're not already on the Mac admin Slack, go and sign up, because it's a rushing river of information. There's hundreds of Slack channels and lots of people that can help you, especially with app config. It messed me up at first, but now it's great. Who wants the box?
What's your experience on it?
Well, I'm coming from the opposite end of the spectrum. I was hoping no one would ask why I was curious, but I work at Apple. I started this past December I came over from Microsoft, thank you. And the concept of BYOD is just fresh to me as a marketer, because previously we would say, like, devices are great because it enables your employee, your workforce. It makes them feel special when you give them something. And so now that we're kind of moving towards this, hey, you come with the device, I'm just curious, like, what is the carrot there? Like, if I'm a college student fresh out of college and I don't have a computer, what do I do in that scenario? So I totally understand it from an IT perspective and a management perspective, but from a user perspective, just trying to wrap my head around why I, as a user, would want to take advantage of BYOD, even though I do it currently. But my incentive is my phone bill is paid for example, in one use case scenario, where for a Mac computer, the user, would need to go and purchase that and then give over, a partition of rights for you all to manage. So I was just curious to know the thinking behind it.
and BYOD Mac is also a thing. So, yeah, and that we could probably have a whole another session on BYOD Mac. Something that I came across back before I worked for Jamf in my other life, really at the end of the day, was if you wanted your email or you wanted access to Wi-Fi, you had to fill out some kind of form, you had to get executive approval. BYOD just opened up this feeling of empowerment. I could do something myself. I have access to this stuff that previously was gated off. So that's some comments that I heard from former employees that I used to work with.
I've also seen preference come up as a reason, right? And let's say I'm the college student who does have a device. I've been using a Mac since college, and so when I enter into the workforce, if what you're offering is a Windows device, but I don't know Windows interface, I would much prefer my device just be managed. So I see both ends, but it's really great to hear from folks who are in the weeds and really doing it. So, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Just quick time check. We're at 5 minutes. So any lingering questions that are around, feel free to throw the catch box around, but love the discussions here. It was great.
Going from Microsoft to Apple, congratulations.
Like the transition, and I have no regrets.
I think just to wrap things up, BYOD is going to be more prevalent moving forward. You know, we're already starting to see that. With allowing these devices to be out in the wild, we want to make sure that they're secure. And we need to do things the right way. We need to communicate to our end users and make sure that they're empowered. And at the end of the day, we just want everybody to have a good experience. So thank you so much for attending this session. Again, my name's Adam. I work with Jamf. You can find me at the Jamf booth until Friday. I'm also on Mac Admin Slack, so feel free to hit me up. Adam D is my handle. So thank you.